So first of all, it's a real pleasure to be here. I was born in a Central African country by the name of Malawi, and we came to this country in the 70s. At that particular period of time, everybody will be very familiar with the situation around Uganda and Idi Amin, and that was rippling across other African countries. As part of the British diaspora and citizens, we were invited to come to the UK, and I came as a 3-year-old child to this country in one very hot summer in the middle of the 70s. This country took me in. I come from a very strong family with very strong connections to its roots in India. My parents were both Gujarati, but this country gave us a home, nurtured me, shaped me, and made me who I am. So I had this really strong connection of my identity and my roots and my culture, and I was also taken in by this country, and I am a perfect combination of the two. Always Leicester. I'm a Leicester-born boy. I said also in my maiden speech, Leicester shaped me, made me aware, and I'm proud to be from the city of Leicester. I went away for university. I lived in a couple of other cities around the country. I lived abroad for a couple of years, but always came back home to Leicester. Leicester is my home, and I've been fortunate. I've done a lot of travelling. I've lived in lots of different places, but there is something very special about this city. And I think sometimes when you're in a city, you don't really appreciate. They say until something's gone, you don't know what you lost. And Leicester is a very unique and wonderful city because of the people who are from this city, people who arrived in this city, and we've made it very unique, and we must be very grateful for what a special place it is. I went to a school first. My first ever school I went to is still there. It's on Green Lane Road. It's the infant school that was there, and I have some stories to say about that, but maybe not on this occasion. Then I went to my junior school, which was known as East Park Primary. Whilst we were in assembly, water used to fall on our heads from the leaking roof. So that school got knocked down, so it doesn't exist anymore. And then I went to Crown Hills Community College. Crown Hills was a wonderful experience for me. It's not the school that it is today. It was a very, very different school. It was very challenging, but it prepared us for life. And then after that, I went to QE, Wigston Queen Elizabeth College, and then I progressed to Manchester University. I think for me, I know you said part, but any part where I see such a diversity of people, and we see where there's an event, whether it's in our wonderful Abbey Park, wonderful Bradgate Park, or Victoria Park, or Spinney Hill, we see people from different cultures and religions coming together. That for me is the most wonderful part of Leicester. I love the hustle bustle of what we call our built-up inner city areas, but I also love the beauty that we have just outside in our natural parks as well. And I love our town centre with Guildhall and where our cathedral is, and it's very special parts of the city. When I grew up, I love football. When I grew up, Liverpool was a very, very popular team, and they were winning everything. But here old me was about the only person in the class that always supported Leicester City. The first football game I went to watch, Gary Lineker, one of our famous sons, was on the bench. And I can still remember it. My uncle took me. I must have been very young. And I fell in love with Leicester City Football Club. And since then, again, no matter where I've lived in the world, I've supported them. I've also made my children season ticket holders as well. Unfortunately, sometimes they're very unhappy about that because we're not doing very well at the moment. But they've got the love of the city as well. I get, when you're in Leicester, we may complain and address issues that this needs to be done, this needs to be done. But when I'm out of the city, we defend it really highly. And if anybody speaks ill of Leicester, and I've said this before, and I'll say it again, that in Parliament, Leicester is a political football. And I'll explain what I mean. One group of people will say, look at Leicester. Leicester shows us that multiculturalism doesn't work. Look at Leicester, people from different communities, ethnic minorities, look what they've done to it. And then equally you have other people who say, look at Leicester, look how wonderful it is. Look at people from different communities have made it such a vibrant, exciting, progressive and united city. Yeah. So there's two groups, and I am determined that we amplify the voice of the latter group, that Leicester is an example of multiculturalism. We have our challenges, we have our issues, we have our problems. Find me a city in this country that doesn't. The only other thing I'd like to add about Leicester is sometimes I feel we have an inferiority complex. we should be shouting out loud the joys, the opportunities, and what we have in this city a lot louder. You know what it is when you have come, like lots of Eastern European family, Eastern African communities that came, or people that came from India or the subcontinent. Everybody's got a story. Very few came with wealth. Many didn't come with anything, and I didn't come with anything. And everything that I achieved was due to the love of my parents and the support of my family, and what this country gave me, and what this city gave me. And did reasonably well in life. Did well with. I'm an optician by profession. Got my own practices. Blessed with a wonderful family, wife, children. You have to. Muhammad Ali is one of my heroes, and he said, "Service to people is the rent you pay to God for living on this earth." When I've been fortunate and been given more than I ever imagined, and definitely more than I ever deserved, you have to give back to society. Because when you give back, I don't see it as giving back. You're helping yourself. So, because I was in a profession doing reasonably well, you have to look after the people that took you there, and you have to give back to the city. So when I saw that there was certainly a rise, after we saw a real spike when we had the economic collapse in 2008, when we had the financial crash. It alerted to me then that decisions and financial irresponsibility made by billionaires were being paid by the people on the streets, the normal people who are working really, really hard. And the mistakes that were made by billionaires and multimillionaires, they were blaming those mistakes on the people that looked a little bit different, that came from a different part of the world, that spoke a different language. And I felt that was a beginning of me saying that, scapegoating people for other people's mistakes. And our political classes and our financial elite were not taking the blame, were going scot-free, and the poor people on the street were paying for it, with recession, with cost of living, with internal fighting, blaming each other, lack of resources. And since then, we've had a policy of virtually austerity in this country, and the cost of living, etc., has gone up. We had then Brexit. Whatever your views are on Brexit, I will respect them. But the rhetoric and the political dialogue at that time against migrants, against people that didn't look like you, I didn't think the country that had nurtured me, that I had fallen in love with. Because, when you were young, you traveled anywhere in the world. Wonderful. But you always wanted to come home because there was a sense of justice and fairness about this country that I have always admired. But now people were saying things that I never thought I would hear openly, what I felt was racial, xenophobic comments. When I was young, remember, there was racism there. I'm not saying there wasn't. I've been victims of racism when I was a child, when I was young. I was chased on the streets, beaten up, and had things thrown at me, etc., etc. But when you were young, you saw the person on the street and you knew what a racist person looked like. And you just learned how to run very fast to get away from them. But the majority of the people were good. Now, people were wearing very smart ties, wearing very sharp suits, speaking eloquent English, going to the best schools in the country, were occupying breakfast shows on sofas, and allowed to express their views unchallenged. Some took seats in Parliament, and I felt that there was no redress, there was no counterbalance, and people like myself and communities that have been blindly following certain political parties, whichever party it was, when it came for them to stand up for us, there was nobody to give us a voice. Nobody. And a lot of people started feeling disenfranchised. Again, they started scapegoating. They started pitting communities against us, religious groups against each other for their political means. And I thought that I am British as anybody else. My children are British as anybody else. And we needed a very, very strong voice to stand up to this divisive politics. And then, Gaza happened. And I make no apology about that. 3,000, 6,000, 10,000, 15,000, 25, 30, 40, thousands and thousands of people were being killed. And our political leaders were not representing a view of a considerable number of their constituents who had concerns on humanitarian issues. And that was the final straw. I'll say two things. One is that is a very lazy assumption to make, because that's the easy thing to say. If anybody followed my campaign and followed my campaign material or followed my speeches, I am a healthcare professional. Healthcare is extremely important to me. I have just spoken to you about divisive when the cost of living crisis, when people can't afford their bills and they're telling me they can't, whether they can eat or heat. I spoke about these matters because I have strong opinions about taxation, etc. For me, our youth are our future. We must invest in them. The fact that so many young people are not in employment, education, or training, the numbers of that, there's no opportunities. Where have our youth clubs gone? These are the things. I can be passionate about an international humanitarian cause and be passionate about these. It's not a case of one or the other. Second thing, whether we like it or not, we live in a global village. What happens across the world affects us here, because we all live in that world, whether it's in India, whether it's in Bangladesh, whether it's in the Middle East, whether it's in the United States of America. Whatever happens here affects them there, and whatever happens there affects us. We cannot close our ears and say we've got nothing to do with it, especially on an issue as contentious as the Palestine issue, because we have historical roots for that problem, just like we have historical roots in this country for problems across the world because of what we did. And we cannot suddenly wash our hands and say, well, it's got nothing to do with this, because it does. It played, I will not deny that it played some role in it. But for me, let me be perfectly honest, when I was knocking on doors in areas where Gaza would not have been on their agenda or even in their conscience, when I knocked on these doors, when they opened the door, the first thing they said to me was, you better not be from the Labour Party, or you better not be from the Conservative Party, because they've just lost trust in the political system. So they didn't even know what the Gaza issue was. So we are going to, for example, vote for reform. Okay, why are you going to vote for reform? Because they are not Labour and they are not Conservative. Not because of any specific policy that reform was given them. It was a complete disenfranchisement, mistrust of the existing political policies, because the established political parties have been taking their votes for granted. They have been expectant that people will always vote for us because where they're going to go. And that level of entitlement was one of the reasons, or one of the main reasons that I won. Look, I like to talk about what my achievements are rather than talking about anybody else. Our existence here in this 18 months has been a real opportunity for people, who had never reached out to their parliamentarian, who didn't have a pathway to their MP before. What an MP did, that has really increased the education level of people, of their accessibility of what a parliamentarian does, how accountable we are to them, that we are, at the end of the day, they are my boss. And that relationship I have worked really, really hard to nurture. Look, it's a very challenging role. I will make no apologies about that, I can tell you. But if anything is worthwhile doing, it's going to be difficult. Okay. As an independent MP, the difference I've made is it has given the hope to people that thought that we cannot enter this sort of field, this is not for us, we are not clever enough. No, if I can do it, a boy that studied at Crown Hills, whose parents couldn't speak English, who's learned to speak English very late on in his own life, not privileged, doesn't have a political connections, to overturn a majority of over 22,000, if Shockat Adam can do it, it will inspire some young girl, some young boy out there thinking, I can do this as well. And that, for me, is one of the greatest motivators to it. That's number one. Secondly, is the established parties know there's a lot more people like me out there. So even sitting in that chamber, when I had the first opportunity to ask the Prime Minister a question, it was on, when will you reverse the cruel, unannounced winter fuel payment bill act that you suddenly said you were going to remove? When were you going to reverse that? We've spoken about the two-child benefit cap. We've spoken about the right of renters over the landlords. All of the things that concern people on the ground, because rates are going up, rents are going up, the cost of food is going up, utility bills are going up, salaries are staying stagnant. On top of that, you're introducing national insurance contribution. When we keep talking about that, we've had lots of things reversed, and hopefully we'll get a lot more things reversed, simply because they know that these independents and others, there's many more like them who traditionally voted for the existing party, the Labour Party, will no longer be part of them and will follow a different path. So we have made incredible changes in a small amount of time. I myself have spoken over 160 times in Parliament, and I don't know how other parliamentarians compare, but that ranges from protecting our churches, to protecting our pregnant mothers, to protecting children, and to protecting the elderly. So the whole scope of whole range of topics we have covered in that time. So we've had, you're absolutely right. I've spoken to all the businesses in town. We went and had a big meeting for a lot of the shop owners on Granby Street. I've spoken to hotel owners, and I've spoken to other businesses as well. There are some, very unique problems to that area of that city, but generally the concerns are the same. Okay, one is lack of parking. Second is the issue of antisocial behaviour in our town centre. Thirdly is the rise in national insurance contributions. Fourth is the rise in rates and the lack of support given to rates. Fifth is the rise in salaries not matched with everything else that is happening. So I have raised in Parliament these particular issues, especially the rise of national insurance contributions for smaller businesses, the lack of support for rates in particular, which I'm really hoping that something will be said about that in the budget that will really kickstart some of our small business. Because people, when businesses do well, we do well. Okay, the whole city does well. Let me give you a quick example. There's nowhere to park in our city, but we want to encourage people to do business in our city. How much does it cost to come into town by bus? People can't afford that much if they've got a family of 5 to come into town centre and cost 3, 6, 9, £15, on top of everything else. There's nowhere to park. I come into town centre, I think it was 2 weeks ago. On a Sunday, there's nowhere to park. So I park in a car park. I come back from my event 1 hour later, 6 o'clock, car park's locked. My car's going to be there all night, and I've got a fine to pay now. So the people that were outside, who also, there was lots of us, said we're never going to come back in town centre. These are small things we need to change. We can change on a local authority level, and we need to make national changes as well. We must bring more services into town. Experiences. People come for experience now. Lots of nice places to go into town, and ensure that we make provisions for parking, and we must freeze rates rises and give small businesses as much financial support as we can. So the National Health Service is obviously something that I'm very, very close to, because I'm practicing a National Health Service optometrist myself. We have a really huge challenge in the National Health Service, and there's so many little facets that I'm involved in. I'm involved in lots of what we call all-party parliamentary groups in Parliament concerning health. Let me tell you something about it. I'll give you a real-life example. I went to a meeting at the GP's practice on Saffron Lane. Something that the GP that told me there has stayed with me. He said to me, Shockat, look, I live 7 miles up the road, and my GP practice is in Saffron Lane. But the life expectancy of where I live and my patients, only 7 miles away, is 14 years. They will live 14 years longer in the area that he lives as opposed to the people in Saffron. So what are these fundamental issues why people are living in this day and age 14 years less just because of a different postcode? We go back to the fundamental, and this is the most fundamental. It's our housing issues, our safe homes, our healthy homes, our warm homes. When people have somewhere to live, they have stability in their life, stops them from addiction, more likely to get a job, more likely to have a family, And these things improve your health. So that is something, everything is linked. So the National Health Service will continue to be in trouble if we do not address the core issues: housing, opportunities for our young people. If young people don't have opportunities, where they're going to go? They're going to go onto the streets. They're going to have issues with drug addiction. You get drug addiction, your immune system goes down, and you have to go to where? Burden the National Health Service. So sometimes we have to look at the big picture. It's really easy to throw money into the National Health Service. Throw money. Money will come and it'll disappear. We need to improve our systems. We need to connect things: education, health, housing, social work, youth work, everything together. Look, I appreciate that and I understand that. And I'm by means not comparing myself to the examples I'm about to give. But in life, if you look at any movement, who has it been started by? Always an individual. Always an individual. And that individual then represents a lot more people, and that individual becomes coalescing to a great movement. Let me say something. When we talk about any issue, let's just talk about independence of India. When Lord Mountbatten from this country came and said, we're going to have independence, it wasn't Lord Mountbatten that gave him independence. It was tens and hundreds of thousands of Mahatma Gandhis that got together that ensured that happened. Names that we'll never hear were responsible for that. He was just one man, but it was the people that made the change. This, as I said to probably one of your first questions, is as an independent, I'm not a singular voice. I am just a representation of thousands of voices as one person. And this is just the beginning. The world is in a political flux. From America to this country, we saw what happened in New York with Mamdani. We saw with whether you like him or not, with Donald Trump, nobody thought he would win, and we are seeing the changes here as well. So I am independent. We have independent alliance members, but there are good colleagues in the Labour Party. There are good colleagues in the Conservative Party, Lib Dems and Greens, with a very, very similar outlook in life. And I feel this moment is the beginning of something amazing about to happen. Yeah, look, I think because I am from Leicester, and as I said, coming from such a background where I found no contradiction of my roots, of my religion, of my language, of where my forefathers came from, my ties to India, my ties to Africa, my religion, and British, I see no contradiction in that. There are those out there that wish to weaponize the fact I am brown. They would like to weaponize the fact I'm a brown man. They would like to weaponize the fact I'm a brown man and a Muslim. These are the things that they will use to create division, to create polarization, to create toxicity. I receive an unimaginable amount of racial abuse, even threats to my life, simply being those things, with no evidence for anything I've ever said or done, just simply being that. Today I had to remove a post from social media because I put a picture of some children from my constituency that had won an award in Parliament. But the two children happened to be brown. And the amount of racial abuse, now I receive it, it's not right, but I can take it. But when they're giving it to young children, I had to remove the post. And the removal of that post showed why I needed to remove it, because the amount of hatred and threats I got at the back of that. So we live in a very toxic world. And my argument is this. We must always be open. If a Muslim and a Hindu and a Jew and a Christian and a Sikh, if somebody once said that if a friend of yours makes a mistake, the mistake stays a mistake, but that person, the friend, still remains a friend. So we must have open discussions to build bridges, not burn bridges. Okay? And we must address the issues that are concerning us as openly as we can for common goals and common humanity. Because sometimes what we can be guilty of is, because we don't want to offend anybody, we don't want to have conversations, difficult conversations. And that is as bad as being antagonistic against each other. Because you're not having that conversation, you're doing more harm, maybe not today, but we're kicking it down the can for our children to pick up. So we must have these conversations. But we must not have these conversations, as I say, to burn bridges, but to build bridges. So to answer your question, it is something that I face with. It was extremely difficult for me in the beginning before I came into politics, I didn't even hardly have a social media account. It's not who I am. I used to do my work and I used to go home because it's very toxic. But now I'm forced to because of my role. But there are more good people than bad people in this world, without a doubt. And we good people must come together with our differences to fight the scourge of modern day, which is racism and xenophobia, and this is going to tear our country apart if we don't come together. Yeah, look, I would reject those accusations. I myself do not partake in any form of intimidation, or it's not who I am. Okay. What sometimes happens is when you're a person of color or a Muslim, they expect you to be responsible for every Muslim and every person of color. When a person who isn't of color commits a misdemeanor, they don't accuse you of the whole community because of that individual. And that's something we have to be very careful of. It's something my record, as I say, speaks for itself. I would never condone any form of aggressive behavior. I will always support robust questioning. That's why I'm here. You know, I've just told you what I have to go through. We are here to be questioned. We are your representatives, and we should be held accountable. But that should never cross the line. And certain things were said, that certain individuals were part of my campaign, and they never were. They never were. But it was easy. It was, how can this individual that we have never heard of take on the establishment and win? So what do? Do we celebrate that? Do we say, look how amazing this country is, that democracy has won? How people, when they were angry, when they were so frustrated with the government, they chose democracy, the fundamental British value of democracy, and voted somebody in because they disagreed. Because we get told in it, Asian people should be part of the system more, should engage with the system more, show how British you are. So what did people do? They showed how British they were. They chose democracy. They chose a candidate, and they thought, no, that's not what we meant. So why did this individual win? Let's try to find all the negativity that could have done it. Not that an individual ran a grassroots campaign, made it about people, concerned about housing, concerned about welfare, concerned about education, concerned about national. No, let's look at tenuous links. And maybe that's why. Because they just can't accept that establishment can be beaten from grassroots organization. You know, we have to go back to what I said earlier. We should have political differences. You may have a very different view to me on economic issues to myself. And we must have respectful differences. But people must get together on one issue. Because especially people from the minority communities, do not let people divide us. Because today they may say, you're okay. It's that community that is the problem. We have been here before. We just have to read our colonial history. Because once they come from one community, then they will come into another community. So we have to stick together. Be honest about our differences. Be respectful about our differences. But our common humanity must stand. When we have a Labour Party that is implementing policies for immigration and trying to mimic the Reform Party, it is an extremely challenging and dangerous situation for this country. Please don't make have any doubt about that. The language, the rhetoric, it gives people, if parliamentarians speak it, newspapers start publishing it, the person on the street becomes emboldened, think I can attack that person because the MP has said it, because my newspaper are saying that all my problems is because of that person who looks different. And this is a very dangerous time for our children and for our future in this country. I still believe we've got enough good people to challenge this. And that is why we must stand up from any political persuasion that our language around race is going to be fundamental for the future of what this country looks like. So we have to stick together. You know, I would like to go back to the issues of that we must make our city the gold standard of what community cohesion looks like, what multiculturalism looks like. Let's celebrate each other's backgrounds and cultures. We need more investments in areas and support for our small businesses. They are dying out for it. You know, we've got areas from, say, our Bangladeshi community in the region of the St. Stephen's Road opening up wonderful cafes. We've got St. Matthew's. They've got restaurants, they've got cafes, they've got cultural centres. A little bit of support, a little bit of investment there. That area will be thriving. People will be coming to visit that area. Let's look at Evington Road. You know, whatever your views are, they've got cafes, they've got restaurants, they've got people who are coming there. Let's invest in those areas to make it more coordinated and give them the support. We've got the lovely Allendale Road area. We've got lovely Queen's Road area. All of our businesses are ready. I would like to see a lot more investments into these small areas to give the businesses well, because if they do well, they give back into the city with their rates and with their taxes. We need to address the issues of cost of living. One of my biggest embarrassments, and to my shame, is until I started campaigning. You see, we all went through that path. You know, I came North Evington, lived in Highfields, and you move out. Okay. When I knocked on doors, I saw the level of poverty in this city. There's a city living within a city here. People who genuinely don't have enough to eat. We have to address this issue. There must be a minimum living standard that nobody should fall below. We are one of the richest countries in the world. We have to ensure that the distribution of wealth is proportional, and we give it to people who really, really need it. So we support those who can provide wealth, and we support those back into work that can't have wealth. We really need to create a generation and invest in our youth. Social media, mental health is massive. I really would like to see lots of regulation around that and support around that. I want our youth clubs back. I want opportunities for young people to go to places, give them the skills to get into employment, skills to get into education, with skills into further education, vocational courses, you know, building, etc., technology. We've got bright people. They just need that opportunity. You know, for me, it's when we look at it as we're supporting ourselves, you'll be supporting me, genuinely. I've always made it about ours rather than mine. And the people can support themselves coming out, and red, blue, yellow, green, whichever party, trust me, you might not hear this from a politician that often. Until you do not change yourself, nobody else is going to really help you to change. You have to take that lead, and you have to come out and say, we want this doing Shockat. We want support in this area. We want advocating for this. You come to me, we work together, and you will be the change. And that is what establishment is really scared of, that people take control of making the change they want to see. Oh gosh, you know, Parliament every single day, I still can't believe when I'm walking in the corridors and know the history of it. It's absolutely incredible. I think there was a moment when I first got there when the then Home Secretary saw me. I was in the chamber for the first time when all the parliamentarians were there. So it was our first day all together. And I sat directly across the road from the Prime Minister. And the Home Secretary saw me. She leaned over and she whispered something into the Prime Minister's ears. The Prime Minister turned round and looked directly at me and nodded his head. And I remember that this is this little boy that grew up in Highfields. Now the Prime Minister of the country is looking at him and knows exactly who he is. And that was a very proud moment. There's been some very difficult, challenging times. I think one day there were 3 incidences where I found that people, sometimes because they just look like you, are not always the best people to represent you. I can give you a very quick example. That particular day, in the morning, the Kemi Badenoch a lady from Nigerian background. And this is in the heart of the riots that were happening in Southport. So there was mosques being attacked, people of colour were being dragged out of cars, and there was racism after the devastating killing of the 3 beautiful young girls. And Kemi Badenoch was simply asked, are you afraid of the far-right members of parliament in reform, and some of which were at the time accused of inciting that violence even more, inflaming it, I should say. And she turned around and said, no, I am more afraid of those Muslim MPs who are sectarian and who are alien to our country. And that was very heartbreaking, having never spoken to us before. And then at lunchtime, we had a statement in the Parliament on the same day, where the Prime Minister came into the chamber and gave a statement on Southport and the riots and what they were going to do about it. At that time, James Cleverly was the opposition frontbencher who said this to the Prime Minister, that I blame the Prime Minister for the riots on the streets of Southport, because when Black Lives Matter happened, the Prime Minister took a knee to support Black Lives Matter, and he has encouraged rioting. So again, we have a black man telling a white man that the reason white people were protesting is because he supported black people. Let that sink in. And that was a day, and on the same day, straight after, we had David Lammy, again an individual of African origins, who has spoken about his slavery ancestry, stand up an hour later and say that as a Zionist, he supports the state of Zionism, and was very heartbroken that he had to make some decisions because there was some evidence of war crimes being committed in Israel. So we had one day, within a few hours, people that should have stood up for minorities, people that should have supported justice over injustice, and people that should have supported unity because of the historical, were talking for the other side. And that was a point where I realized we have a real challenge on our hands. Sorry for the long answer, but that was a very tough day. You know, for me, I like to be part of something that will write the destiny and the future of the people without a voice. And I will always be conscious of that I don't want to represent me, I want to represent the people. And whatever the best vehicle is for me to represent the people, that is what I will always choose.